Right, this video could cause a little bit of controversy. Hello, my name is Alex Does F1 Stuff and welcome back to another random F1 video. I don't know what to call these, they are basically just random things, random little bits that I decide to spend time on Excel working out and creating cool little statistical videos. Anyway, today we are using maths to determine the best ever decade in Formula 1 history and also the best season. So before we get started, this video is going to contain no opinions of myself. It is going to be entirely maths based. Maths is good, opinions are bad. So what I have done in Excel the past couple of weeks, I have gone through each and every season. I have 5 different categories which I will be scoring each season in, and out of 10, 10 being the worst, 1 being the best, so you want a nice low score. I will then add each score up for each season in the 5 categories, and then that gives that season a score. Then over the decade, those scores will be added up to give a decade score, and we can then compare each decade. I will just be explaining the maths as well for those that are interested, and yes, we do have 5 categories. There are 5 nice little categories to go over. I will pop a time on the screen if you guys just want to skip ahead to the order and if you don't really care so much about the maths. So category number 1 is, did the championship of that year go down to the last round? I feel this is a fairly needed one to decide if it's a good season, and if yes, you will score 1, and if no, you will score 9. It's a very binary sort of category that I've got there. But category number 2, how many race winners were there? Now this again is an interesting one because it depends on how dominant that season was, and this is done by doing 12 minus the number of race winners. So why 12 minus the number of race winners? Well, so far the minimum number of race winners we've had in a season is 3, and then the maximum has been 11. So the maximum number of points you could score for this if you had 3 race winners is 9, which is bad, and the lowest is 1 if you had 11 race winners, which is good. And category number 3 is, how many races did the championship lead go unbroken? Now I've got a little graph to show you exactly what I mean. So this is 2009, the 2009 championship between Button and Vettel, and you can see the Button ended up winning in Australia and held on to the championship lead for the whole season, even against his teammate Barrichello as well. Barrichello never led the championship at any point. So this would be a bad score for Jenson Button, and if we instead look at a more recent one, 2018, Lewis Hamilton against Sebastian Vettel, he only led the championship unbroken from Germany onwards, not the whole season. So if we just send those graphs away, how is this calculated? A little bit complicated, I suppose. It is the number of races that the championship lead was unbroken divided by the number of races in the championship times by 10 to give me a nice whole number between 1 and 0. So the lower the number, the better your score, the higher number, the worse your score. And category number 4, how many independent championship leaders were there? Now I've highlighted the word independent as it's very similar to category number 5, but what I mean by this is, picture 2008, we have 4 individual championship leaders at any one stage during that year. We've got Lewis Hamilton leading at the start and then at the end. We've got Felipe Massa occasionally leading. We've got Raikkonen occasionally leading, and just for one race only, we had Robert Kubica leading the championship. And if I just send this away real quick and we work out how exactly this is calculated, it is done by doing 10 minus the number of independent championship leaders there were. And again, the lower your score, the better, the higher your score, the worse off you are. And the final category is, how many times did the championship lead change? Now this can be applied to a slightly more dominant season, a slightly more team-dominated season, for example, 2014. This was a year that was dominated by the 2 Mercedes, but they changed lead 3 times. So there were 2 independent championship leaders, but there were 3 championship lead changes. And again, if we send the graph away, this is calculated by just doing 10 minus the number of championship lead changes. And that is all 5 categories out of the way. I think what I can actually do is create another one of these videos with some different categories, because obviously changing the categories or removing a category is going to change the result. So I could come up with another 5 categories, make a different video, and then compare to see if anything's changed. But with that out of the way, we will jump on into the order. And in 7th place is the 1950s with a score of 355.69 out of a possible 500. And the best season in the 1950s was 1950 itself, scoring 24.43, and it was of course the championship which Nino Farina won against Juan Manuel Fangio. And its worst season was 1959, scoring 36.00, and this was won by Jack Brabham from start to finish. And so to 6th place in the list, we've got the 1990s with a score of 352.70, a little bit closer to the 1950s, but we have a best year of 1999, scoring a very low 16.63, and this was of course the showdown between Schumacher and Häkkinen. Lots and lots of good overtakes, good racing, good everything in this year. And we had a worse year in 1992, scoring a whopping 45 out of 50, and this was of course Mansell's Williams dominated year, where he won the first 5 races of the championship and just waltzed away with it from there. And so to 5th place we have the 2000s. The 2000s are in 5th with a score of 349.19. So far only 5 points has covered just 3 decades, and we have a best year of course 2008, scoring 20.00. The title showdown between Lewis Hamilton and Felipe Massa went down to the wire, 1 point difference. It was a solid championship. And we had a worst year of, you probably could have guessed it, 2002. 46 points out of a possible 50. Schumacher won this year with 6 races to go. I think he had a lowest finish of 3rd. He finished every race on the podium. It was bonkers. And so to 4th place we've got the 1960s with a score of 344.54, with the best year of 1964 scoring 24.00, which was a 3-way British battle between John Surtees, Graham Hill and Jim Clark. There was then the worse year of 1962, scoring again 46.00, which was a Graham Hill dominated year. And now to the big bucks, 3rd place, the 3rd best decade in Formula 1, the 1970s. And this had a score of 331.63, with a best year of 1974. The championship battle between Emerson Fittipaldi and Clay Regazzoni. Clay Regazzoni was actually a championship challenger in this year, right up until the last round. And then we had a worst year of 1971, scoring a mammoth 41.09 points, and this was very Stewart's dominated. Jackie Stewart ended on 62 points, with 2nd place finishing on 33. And so to 2nd place, the 2nd best decade in Formula 1 is the 2010s. The 2010s. And this decade had a score of 325.77, with, you can probably guess which is going to be the best year, 2010, 13.53, the lowest score we have seen yet. And it was of course that incredible title battle between Alonso and Vettel, and I mean at one point Webber, Hamilton, Button was in it at one point as well. It was one of the best races of the modern era in Formula 1, with Vettel only leading the championship in the final round after winning the race. But we then had a worse year in 2015, 47 out of 50, and this was of course the year which Lewis Hamilton just dominated. He had the speed, he had the pace over Nico Rosberg, and led from start to finish. And so through a process of elimination we go to the 1st place, the best decade to watch in Formula 1, the 1980s. Everything was better in the 80s, as they say. Ah, God. And there was a giant points gap, 250.01 out of 500, compared to 2010s, which was only in second place, which scored 320 something. There's huge points difference. But the best year, 1986, 16.63. This was, of course, Prost versus Mansell, McLaren versus Williams. One of the better years in Formula 1. It then had a worse year of 37.50, 1989, which was a Prost year against Ayrton Senna. And there we have it, the best year in Formula 1. But now, it's the top 10. It's the top 10. So I've gone over the 7 best decades from worst to best, but we've now actually got the top 10 seasons, the individual seasons in Formula 1. And this graph just shows the number of seasons in the top 10 by each decade. So there were no good season or no amazing seasons really from the 1950s or the 60s. The 70s there was just one season in the top 10, 1974. The 80s had 4, and then the 90s had 2, the 2010s had 2, and the 2000s had just the 1 in 2008. So this clearly shows that the best year to be watching Formula 1, according to my 5 categories and a lot of maths, is the 1980s. And conversely, we go to the bottom half of the field, and we've got 2015 slap bang at the bottom, and 2001 10th from last. And this graph is basically the inverse really. Nothing from the 1970s, nothing from the 1980s in the bottom 10, and we've then got the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1990s on 2, the 2000s on 3, and the 2010s on 1. Now honestly this kind of makes a bit of sense, because this is where the domination popped up. And that's why some of these seasons were boring. So the 1950s we had Fangio winning, the 1960s we had Clark and Graham Hill and Jackie Stewart winning, then the 1990s it was Prost, Senna, Schumacher, I suppose for 2 years, then the 2000s it was definitely Schumacher, and then the 2010s, the past 6 years we've had Hamilton and Mercedes. And then you can say from that, the only year that we haven't had consistent complete domination of the sport is the 1980s, which is why they've scored so highly. So definitely the 1980s are the best year to just watch Formula 1 and be a part of it, according to these 5 categories. And I will leave you with the full list, all 70 seasons of Formula 1 on screen right now, ordered from 1st 2010 all the way to 70th 2015. That's crazy actually, you can fit all 70 years of Formula 1, good to bad, in just 5 years. So we've gone from having the best season, 2010, to having the worst season, 2015, in just 5 years. I mean, even 2009, in 59th place, compared to 2010, which was first, and then the year after that is in 60th, 2011. That's crazy, that is absolutely crazy. But like I said a little bit earlier in the video, I might make another one of these. Whether I turn it into a video or not, I'm not sure. But I might make another 5 categories up, compare them, see if they're any different, then choose another 5 categories to get 3, and then sort of average them out. And then it might just be a bit more of a fairer comparison. As obviously, depending on which categories I choose, influences quite heavily on the outcome of the championship and the point scoring that this is done. So if you do have any suggestions for little categories that you'd like me to choose, please leave them in the comments down below, as my brain is a bit frazzled. I struggled coming up with 5 categories, to be honest. But that is all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and please, if you've got any suggestions of other videos like this that you'd like me to do, leave them in the comments down below and I'll make sure to respond to them. But that is all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next video with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.